So, the first thing I want to do is to, profile the NECT against the national education system. We work in 5 provinces, and unfortunately those provinces exclude Mr. Lesotho's province, although we're working out something now. And in those provinces we work specifically in 8 districts, and there's a reason why we chose those districts, and perhaps to say that among those 8 districts there are some fairly well-performing districts, and there are those that aren't performing well, because a big part of what the NECT does is learning on behalf of the system. Those districts are home to 4,362 schools, which is just above 17% of the system, and if you took teachers, slightly above 17%. 4,362 schools are a hell lot of schools to work with, particularly if you want to go to some level of depth in terms of what you do. So out of those 4,362 schools, we identified 415 schools, which we agreed, we want to give a fresh start. And we could have possibly said, these are the dysfunctional schools, and we're going to give you more dosage, but we took a positive, outlook. And obviously there are no, such, focus schools across, the country. I could have added another row that compares the budget and, the NECT budget and the national budget, allocated to education. So without mentioning the figures, particularly those of the NECT, the national education system runs with about just below 300 billion rands MEC. I'm expecting a nod there. So if you took our budget, we're running on, something like a 0.06 something % of that national budget. So when I presented this to some business people, one of them stood up and said, "Sir, it looks like you are trying to help clean up a very big pool, and yet you are such a small, person in the whole scheme of things." So he said, "How are you planning to do this?" I said, "Look, the one thing you must, appreciate is that we haven't been set up to clean up the entire pool, but we've been set up to help identify what could be the best mix of a chlorine and acid and detergent that can be used to clean up the pool. For the pool is quite big, and it will take time, to clean the pool and to maintain the pool clean on an ongoing basis, right?" So, had we not thought like that, we could have packed up our, bags and went home. So, what then do? We embark on initiatives that yield new ideas, approaches, and products that can create enhanced value in the education system. And the success of the NECT, therefore, is gauged by the change in the educational outcomes in the targeted institutions, as per the numbers that I gave you before. 2, identifying innovations that can improve the system, and we're very, targeted, and we have to make priorities. Decisions about where we focus, but we gradually are. I think we need power, isn't it?
Yeah.
We gradually are looking for other ways of increasing the impact in a more flexible and flexible way, which may include expanding networks and so on and so forth. And lastly, the adoption of an institutionalization of these innovations in the system. And I think that has been one of the big challenges in the relationship between business and the education system. So there's lots of innovation things that are done by business in collaboration with schools, individual schools and circuits and so on. But the big challenge is how those are graduated into innovations that are institutionalized, replicated and institutionalized in the system. So we're grappling with that. But then in the context where the phenomenon we are busy with is so complex and has many facets, from HR to how to teach, resourcing and so on, we had to choose what defines the key challenge we wanted to we are addressing. And I think that what defines the big challenge in the South African education system right across at the moment, and perhaps in relation to the majority of the schools is, the challenge of too little learning happening in the classrooms. And I want to come back to this challenge. But just to give you a sense, the national curriculum would expect about 408 pieces of work in a grade 2 home language, and the actual that's being written there, it's quite low. So the things that we do with principals, with teachers, with district officials, and with provincial officials and so on, should actually help to bring that red line up. And that's what we have declared as the main thing that we are working on. So the kind of innovations and solutions that we're looking for are those that would help to raise that red line upwards. The second I think definition of the challenge we're facing, it's the utilization of the resources that are already in the classroom. So government put in stationery, workbooks, their desks, their classrooms, their teachers, and so on. They may not be enough, but the big bulk of what we need in the classroom is there. And the big challenge is utilizing those resources, optimizing the value from those resources. As you can see, very little utilization of the workbooks. So that being the challenge, and in the context where we have this 300 billion rands system, how then should the private sector or partners from outside government should be engaging with the business of improving education? So as we know, choices have to be made on where interventions can be made from learner level to the national level, and there are a whole lot of opportunities that we can get involved there. On the y-axis, we know that one of our big concerns is impact. What a part of the system are we impacting? To what extent do these interventions that we engage in are sustainable? So just to give you an example, if we work with Saturday classes would impact on learners, and the possibility is that would impact on those learners, that cohort of learners, and it's likely going to be small, and you're going to have to, reinvest, on any cohort that comes through. So the sustainability then gets compromised. On the other end, you could be working with the national system, and those, interventions would have impact on there. So the choice that we had to make as the NECT was, where do we pitch in this whole space? We really had choices, right? The expectations with some of our partners are, look, we want to see changes here, learners in schools and so on. It's a valid request, but then it has a different set of sustainability and systemic impact. If you talk to some of our partners in government, they say, when are you getting to the national level? We're working towards that, and I'll show you how we've agreed to work from somewhere here to there. The other choice we had to make was, in the scale of, getting into kind of short-term, small scale, quick, result, interventions, to identifying what could be innovations that we can test, trial out, and see to the replication at national level. Simple said, but that's the thinking that we're following. So our focus, as the NECT, is we work with those 8 districts involving those schools, but whatever innovations that we are implementing have to be proven in those specific schools that we work with, so that we work on the replication of those. So, and there are some examples on how that is starting to happen. One of those is an innovation on how we help the schools to bridge the gap between the expectations of the national curriculum and the implementation of the curriculum as as it happens in schools. So, the MEC of Gauteng would be very happy to, hear that we took some of the, strategies initially designed, in Gauteng, and adapted those for the other provinces, and we're busy implementing them. I'll show you the figures, to that effect. Right. So Here are some of the common levers from the NDP and the Education Action Plan. We identified 6 thematic areas in which we're going to work, and we're promoting that South Africans should work around in order to improve education. The first of those is the professionalization of teaching. It's a very deep concept, and we made choices on how we're going to pitch in there. And professionalization of teaching would involve a range of things from reskilling teachers to working on their ethics and ethos in schools and so on and so forth. There are various initiatives that we're trialing out with the department to do that. Some of the significant ones, as I've indicated, is designing and introducing a standardized program. So programs that teachers follow on a daily basis for the entire year, and helping them to master that, because that would help bridge the gap between the expectation of the curriculum and what is happening in the school. Content knowledge, a big challenge. In respect to content knowledge, we don't have what it takes to go and train all the teachers. So we chose math, science, and languages as the areas that we focus on. But then even within that pool of teachers, we've then agreed with the districts that we're working with that we're going to help them develop a pool of lead teachers in math, science, and languages, because we think that's more sustainable, and that would in fact allow for the replication of the interventions. So those are some of the figures that we have achieved. So these are the figures people we've worked, teachers we've worked with, and materials that we've put out. But the whole intention is to test the effectiveness of these initiatives. The second theme is promoting courageous and effective leadership, and again striking a balance between transformational and transactional leadership in that respect, because we think both are important. So helping school principals and management teams on resource management, curriculum tracking, and just initiating courageous leadership conversations, which we think it's important to improve leadership in schools. The third, it's the capacity of the state, contributing to improving the capacity of the state. So the staff that we work with the districts, we're starting to take those to the provincial level, and we're working with the curriculum advisors at provincial level. We've been working with the national curriculum advisors with a view to start building the capacity of the state to implement those innovations. There are, however, other initiatives that we are involved in with the national department, such as helping to think through the modernization of the school administration system, for instance. And once that's done, then it's available to the entire system to start improving the operations of the system. Much lesser work done in the areas of learner welfare and parent and community involvement. But in my conclusion, I want to, our view, and a resounding, thought from this experience is that there has been a lot of supply side interventions from government and from the private sector to help improve education. So talk about the material that I've shown you, which have been put into the classrooms. Talk about accountability measures that we have made available. Talk about teacher training, talk about technology, and so on and so forth. So, and we know that the reach and the impact of those supply side interventions can and need to be improved, but a lot of that is not met with the requisite demand side, demand from in the main teachers, learners, and parents. And one of the observations, and we don't know how to exactly deal with it, is that there is a lot of latent energy at the bottom, particularly amongst teachers, learners, and parents, that we should be turning into value. So the challenge is, how do we come up with demand side disruptors that will help us access that latent energy. So and these sorts of disruptors don't have to be limited to technological and technocratic disruptors. They have to include as well social disruptors, that will help us better utilize the resources that are in schools and so forth. And I think part of what Partners for Possibility are doing is to try and bring in some disruptors at the bottom of the pyramid to get more demand for the sorts of things that are supplied through the system and the interventions that we provide. Thank you.